Late in April of 1945, a once mighty empire trembled on the brink. As the Red Army encircled the battered German capital, Adolf Hitler retreated to a hidden bunker, clinging to a desperate hope. The city above convulsed in flames. Millions of lives and the fate of all Europe hinged on this final showdown. Would the Nazi regime hold out in its last stand? Or would Berlin 1945 become a graveyard for Hitler's twisted ambition? Strap in for a 2-hour epic journey through the cataclysmic closing chapter of World War II as we uncover the fall of Berlin, 1945. Welcome to Twilight Over the Reich, the 1945 fall of Berlin. In this extensive documentary, we chronicle the brutal, chaotic, and ultimately decisive fight for Berlin that brought Nazi Germany's reign of terror to an end. From the unstoppable surge of the Soviet Union's armies to the frantic maneuvers of Nazi Germany's last defenders, we'll peel back every layer of this historic siege. Expect never-before-heard testimonies from survivors, vivid reenactments of desperate street battles, and insight into the psychological unraveling of Hitler's inner circle. Follow the collision course of the Red Army's unstoppable war machine and the Allies' final thrust into the heart of Hitler's crumbling empire. As the bombs thunder above and the city smolders, we'll reveal the human cost and heroism that characterized these last days. The path to Berlin was paved with blood, sacrifice, and a resolve to crush fascism once and for all. This is the story of an empire's final breath and the dawn of a new world order. If you're ready to learn how the once invincible Third Reich collapsed in on itself, join us as we descend into the heart of Berlin, where the last act of World War II in Europe played out with unimaginable intensity. It all began with a shift in the tides of war that started long before Berlin's downfall. The Soviet victory at Stalingrad in early 1943 shattered the myth of Nazi invincibility. Stalin's forces gained momentum, driving the Germans from the Volga to the borders of Eastern Europe. Though the road ahead was littered with scorched cities and countless casualties, the tide had turned. In these early days, Berlin itself seemed far from threatened. Yet, behind the scenes, German leadership quarreled over how best to stop the Red Army's relentless advance. Exhausted divisions scrounged for supplies, morale dipped dangerously low, and the Reich's aura of dominance faded with every mile lost. Even Hitler's generals knew that the specter of total defeat lurked on the horizon. In February 1945, the Allies, Stalin, Roosevelt, and Churchill, met at Yalta. Their overarching goal was simple: bring Nazi Germany to its knees and define a post-war framework for Europe. Behind closed doors, friction emerged regarding spheres of influence. The West eyed a democratic Germany, while the Soviets demanded security through territorial buffers. Though united against the Nazi regime, these powers laid complicated groundwork for the Cold War to come. For Berlin, the Yalta Conference confirmed the city's fate. The Allies agreed to push forward on multiple fronts, with the Soviets leading the final assault from the east. The day of Berlin's reckoning drew near, even as the seeds for future global tensions were quietly sown. By March 1945, the Soviet juggernaut rolled across Poland and into the German heartland. Thousands of artillery pieces, tanks, and infantry divisions advanced with unstoppable force. For the soldiers of the Red Army, vengeance was a powerful motivator. Burned villages, millions of lost compatriots, and Nazi atrocities fueled their resolve. Amid the driving snow and muddy roads, supply lines stretched thin, but Soviet morale soared. Every new village freed from Nazi grip reminded them of why they fought. With each mile, Stalin's generals fine-tuned their strategy, encircling large German forces and pressing relentlessly toward Berlin. In Hitler's Reich, rumors of the unstoppable Red Army spread dread throughout soldiers and civilians alike. The thunder of Soviet guns grew louder day by day. In the heart of Berlin lay the Führerbunker, an underground fortress of concrete walls where Adolf Hitler plotted his final stand. Surrounded by loyalists and an increasingly fraught staff, Hitler clung to illusions of a miracle that would drive back the Soviet advance. Panic seeped through corridors. Commanders recognized the city's hopeless situation, but feared the dictator's wrath. Outside, the remnants of the Wehrmacht, reinforced by teenage Hitler youth and hastily formed Volkssturm units, prepared Berlin's defenses. Anti-aircraft batteries repurposed for ground targets lined the streets. Civilians dug trenches in city parks. But even the most dedicated Nazi loyalists suspected the war was lost. Berlin had become a fortress beset by illusions, with the Red Army closing in. By mid-April, Soviet forces under Marshals Zhukov and Konev prepared a pincer strategy to entrap Berlin. The Vistula-Oder offensive had already brought them to the city's doorstep. Troops readied to cross the Oder and Spree rivers, while German defenders raced to block bridges and set up last-ditch fortifications. Berlin's suburbs turned into fortified pockets. The Reich's propaganda machine insisted that help from the West would arrive, or that a secret Nazi superweapon would turn the tide. But reality told a different story. The Soviets advanced on multiple roads, cutting off any chance of reinforcement. The stage was set for a brutal, urban fight to the death. On April 16, 1945, Soviet artillery lit up the night sky. Thousands of guns unleashed a barrage so intense it was said the ground shook for miles. Zhukov's troops surged toward the city, while Konev's forces advanced from the south. The German lines wavered under the immense firepower. At the Silo Heights, the last major geographic barrier before Berlin, a fierce struggle erupted. Nazi defenders rained down shells on the Red Army from well-prepared positions, casualties mounted on both sides. Despite daunting losses, Soviet units forged ahead, bridging the final gap to Berlin's outskirts. Inside the city, residents cowered in basements as the rumble of artillery approached like an approaching storm. By April 20th, Soviet tanks reached the outer boroughs of Berlin. Street-by-street combat began, with each avenue turned into a fortress of rubble. Snipers lurked in high-rise windows. Anti-tank rockets awaited every corner. Civilians, caught in the crossfire, scrambled for safety. The city quickly became a maze of booby traps and bombed-out ruins. Soviet infantry advanced cautiously, employing flamethrowers to root out German positions from cellars and bunkers. Overhead, the Luftwaffe was mostly absent. German skies belonged to Allied bombers. As the Red Army pressed forward, the stench of gunpowder and despair filled the air. Berlin's downfall was inevitable, but that did little to reduce the carnage on the ground. Deep in his bunker, Adolf Hitler celebrated his 56th birthday on April 20th. Outside, artillery blasts shook the bunker walls. Reports streamed in. Entire divisions lost contact. Soviet forces blocked all escape routes, and the Allies in the West advanced on multiple fronts. Yet Hitler clung to the belief that relief armies could save Berlin. Frantic meetings ensued. Generals tried to convince Hitler to flee or negotiate. He refused, launching tirades against supposed betrayals by the Wehrmacht. Even as the city burned above him, he planned illusory counterattacks, often with phantom units that no longer existed. Some staff sensed the end, but few dared speak it aloud. In those final days, the bunker became a surreal stage for the regime's last act. As the battle raged, Berlin's civilian population faced unimaginable horror. Air raids had already left thousands homeless. Now, artillery shells and street fighting claimed more lives daily. Food and water were scarce. With no functioning utilities, families huddled in basements turned makeshift shelters. Stories abound of hidden compassion and tragedy. Neighbors sharing dwindling resources, families risking sniper fire to find bread, and Red Army soldiers offering help or exacting brutal vengeance depending on circumstances. Chaos blurred moral lines, and survival became paramount. Berliners were trapped in a crucible of destruction, powerless to halt the unstoppable forces clashing in their streets. For Soviet troops, capturing the Reichstag symbolized the defeat of Nazi Germany. The imposing structure, once the seat of German power, now lay battered but still standing. Fighting intensified around the Spree River, with both sides determined to control every bridge and intersection. As the Red Army advanced on the government quarter, each block became a fortress. German SS units and Hitler Youth fought with fanatical resolve, convinced they were defending the Reich to the last bullet. Meanwhile, Soviet artillery hammered the area day and night. Street by street, the Red Army edged closer. By late April, the Reichstag came within view, battered by shrapnel and crowned with smoke. The final push to storm its grand halls commenced. For many soldiers, hoisting the red banner atop this building would be the ultimate testament to victory. On April 30th, with Soviet forces mere blocks away, Hitler married Eva Braun in a brief, somber ceremony. Hours later, the couple retreated to a private room. Gunshots rang out. Hitler and Braun were found dead, their bodies hastily burned in the bunker's courtyard. The Nazi leader's self-inflicted demise sent shockwaves through Berlin's defenders. Some saw it as the final betrayal, others as an inevitable end. In the bunker's corridors, conflicting orders and frantic attempts to negotiate a truce erupted. For the Third Reich, the era of Hitler was over. Outside, the battle continued, but the symbolic heart of Nazism had stopped beating. In the early hours of May 2, 1945, after furious close-quarters combat, Soviet troops finally overran the Reichstag. The iconic photo of soldiers hoisting the red flag atop its ruined rooftop became an enduring image of Nazi Germany's defeat. Though pockets of resistance lingered, Berlin's fate was sealed. With the building captured, the city's remaining defenders either surrendered or attempted to break out westward, hoping for leniency from American or British forces. As dawn broke, smoke still curled from the city's wreckage, overshadowed by the fluttering Soviet banner. The final major campaign in Europe was at an end, culminating in a moment that epitomized the Allies' triumph and the costliness of war. In the days that followed, German forces across Europe capitulated in waves. On May 2nd, Berlin's last defenders formally surrendered to Soviet generals. Karl Dönitz, Hitler's successor, attempted to orchestrate partial surrenders to the Western Allies, hoping to slow Soviet gains. But the final act came on May 8th, VE Day. when the unconditional surrender took effect. Berlin lay in ruins. Tanks littered the streets. Countless buildings stood hollowed out. The human toll weighed heavily. Hundreds of thousands of civilians and soldiers had perished or fled. In the months to come, Allied forces would carve the city into occupation zones, planting the seeds for a divided Germany and the eventual rise of the Cold War. But for now, the guns fell silent, marking the end of the Third Reich. Though Hitler's Germany was gone, Berlin's struggle continued. Mountains of rubble blocked roads, thousands were homeless, and famine loomed in the battered capital. Under Soviet administration in the eastern sector, reconstruction began, with forcibly conscripted laborers clearing debris brick by brick. Meanwhile, the Western Allies arrived in their designated zones. Amid suspicion and cultural clashes, Berliners tried to survive. Black markets flourished. Families searched for missing relatives, and Allied relief agencies provided basic necessities. Within a few years, ideological rifts hardened, transforming Berlin into a flashpoint between East and West. The city, once Hitler's seat of power, evolved into a symbol of the new global order, a front line of the Cold War. The fall of Berlin, 1945, was more than just a military victory. It was the dramatic finale to 6 years of world-shaking conflict. Here, the Nazi regime disintegrated, and the shape of post-war Europe began to take form. Out of the city's ashes, new alliances and enmities were born, setting the stage for the world we live in today. Thank you for joining us in Twilight Over the Reich, the 1945 fall of Berlin. We hope this deep dive into the final desperate weeks of Nazi Germany has illuminated both the epic scope and tragic human dimension of this pivotal moment. Please like, share, and subscribe for more extensive explorations into World War II history. Remember, the rubble of Berlin stands as a monument to how quickly empires can crumble when built on tyranny and aggression. May we carry these lessons forward so that the horrors and sacrifices of the past serve as a warning and a pledge to strive for peace. Until next time, this is your host, signing off.